Welcome to Session 2 of Parenting Through Divorce. I'm hoping you completed your action step for the last session and had a chance to talk with your children about some of the assumptions and discovered whether or not what you originally thought was true. Throughout this program, I would absolutely love to see any completed worksheets from any of the sessions. You can send those to me at grady@midlifedivorcerecovery.com, or you can reply to any emails you receive from me throughout this course. So in this session, we will eventually tell your story. But before we get there, I believe it's very important that you understand what is happening to you and talk about the divorce process. By understanding the process and stages you are going through and the tasks you need to accomplish, you will better be able to explain to your children what is going on, what you are experiencing, and why it may be taking so long. I know my mother was very overwhelmed by the process and often didn't know what was happening to her. So it was difficult for her to answer simple questions or explain to people that she couldn't just get over it. The goal by the end of this session is for you to be able to tell your story, to answer questions people and your children will ask you throughout this process. Our primary objectives for this session are: first, I want you to help you understand the divorce grieving process. We will cover both the stages of divorce grief and the tasks of divorce. I firmly believe that you can't truly help others understand your divorce or effectively tell them your story until you fully understand the divorce yourself. This is a long section, and I would encourage you to take a break after we finish this first part. Second, I want to go over asking for patience, what to focus on as you ask them, how to tell them what you're feeling, and beginning to tell your story as you ask for patience. Third, we're going to discuss telling your children about the divorce, how to tell them, what not to tell them, and remind you to tell them over and over that it's not their fault. And lastly, we're going to go over the action step for this session, and our ultimate goal is for you to script your canned responses. Know what you're going to tell people before the situation comes up, being prepared for the questions people will ask you. Understanding your divorce process will truly help formulate what you're going to say. Understanding the divorce recovery and grieving process. This session is essentially a crash course to two of the models that outline the general recovery process. All of you will be in different places along this journey, but eventually you will all need to pass through each stage of the process before you truly get better. Before we start, we'd particularly like to acknowledge the Judicial Council of California and their handbook on parenting after separation, as well as all of the resources we use to help develop this session, all of which are listed in the resource section of the program. Divorce is a process that occurs over time, and it's not a straight line process. I feel like this picture accurately represents the path most parents take to reach a full recovery. People want and expect your recovery to be quick and simple, but the reality is much different. You'll feel completely lost at times, completely overwhelmed, and you may feel like you're losing it. But I want you to begin to recognize that there is a beginning and an end. The route may be completely convoluted, but you are on a path. At this point, I hope you've printed out the session outlined, and if not, I highly encourage you to press stop, go print it out, and come back to us when you're ready. I also encourage you to take notes on the outline, because not everything I say is going to be written on the slides. All right. So first, divorce is a grieving process. Oftentimes, people will try to diminish the divorce process, but what I want you to understand is that you truly are grieving, and I would argue that you may be grieving even more strongly than if your ex had simply passed away. What you're experiencing is as bad as it feels. I remember seeing my mom in total absolute agony, and this was very difficult for me to see as a child. It's often scary to see it, but you're experiencing loss at so many levels that people don't recognize. The loss of your significant other, the loss of your roommate in creating a family home, your bedmate, your companion to parties and school conferences, your companion to inside jokes or financial security, and you're experiencing the loss of hopes and dreams you had for your relationship with that person. And quite often, your children and others just simply can't see that. Full recovery typically takes about 2 years. When you first hear this, you may think that's not possible. That is way too long, and it can't possibly take that long. I'm not saying it's always just going to be sadness and anger and pain during those 2 years, but truly feeling stable and secure again typically does take about 2 years. And almost all experts agree that this is the same for you and your children. After 2 to 3 years, your children should generally be adjusted to the new situation and hopefully living a healthy, normal life. I might argue that this could be potentially correlated to how quickly and well you recover and adjust. Third, your emotions are going to be erratic, unpredictable, and oftentimes very intense. The women in our community often refer to this as the roller coaster of emotions. A single song can send you into a hysterical fit. I remember riding in the car with my mom, and anytime an Eagles song or a Clapton song or a Joe Cocker song came on, I knew we were in trouble. And this lasted for about 3 whole years. During that time, we had to listen to talk radio basically every car ride. This process and these feelings are normal. One of the first things I noticed when I first began working with Susie, my mom, several years ago was how normal all the crazy stories ended up being. The screaming, the cussing, the throwing, the following of the ex around. I used to think my mom was crazy, but after reading some of the stories in the community, she was merely average. And lastly, these feelings won't last forever. Time does heal wounds, even the deep ones such as divorce. This goes for you and your children. I saw it with my mom as we've seen it over and over again. So what does this process actually look like? The 5 stages of divorce grief. Some of you may recognize this as the Kubler-Ross model. Each stage is distinct, and you must go through them all before you can truly recover. First, we have denial or shock. Second is anger. And third is bargaining. Fourth is depression. And lastly, we have acceptance, which is our ultimate goal. All these stages are healthy and natural reactions to divorce, and you need to experience them. I kind of like to think of them as hurdles, and each stage has its defining characteristics and benefits, as well as the risk you need to be aware of. As we go through these, I'm going to list the risks as they apply to your children and the dangers that can arise from staying in a stage for too long. You're probably going to bounce back and forth between these stages quite often, and will probably stay in certain stages much longer than others. I think the most common tend to be anger and depression. As a parent, even though you're going through these stages, you still need to have your wits about you so you can be an effective parent. And hopefully by recognizing where you are, you can anticipate the challenges and better address them for your children. Also remember that your children will be experiencing these stages as well and going through their own process of grief, some to a lesser degree and others to a stronger. So let's start. Denial or shock. Most of you are probably past this stage, but you may still find moments where you think, this cannot be happening. And for those who are separated and still not officially divorced, you may actually still be here. Some of the hallmark expressions from this stage are, she just needs some time. He's acting out some midlife crisis. This shouldn't be happening to us. This stage typically happens well before the actual divorce takes place. But my mom told us several times that even in the courtroom at the official divorce, she thought to herself, this cannot be real. He'll just come over here and say, what are we doing here? We love each other. This is ridiculous. Let's just go home. Some of the typical characteristics of denial or shock. It is an emotional defense mechanism. It's your body's coping mechanism that shuts down your feelings. Some call it the quiet before the storm. You will probably feel numb and anxious. This stage is only supposed to last a limited time as you prepare yourself emotionally, physically, and as a parent so you can get ready to deal with the pain and challenges that are coming. Eventually, you will have to face the reality and experience the pain. You have to experience the pain to move on. And there are many risks your children face if you stay here too long. You risk putting off important decisions for your children and your family. For example, postponing figuring out how to adjust financially, or postponing the decision to find a new house. This creates uncertainty from dragging out the inevitable. You risk leaving your child in a constant state of uncertainty about where they're going to be, what the new situation is, and what's happening. I believe my mom's denial or shock added about 2 years to my ability to feel stable again. My dad moved to 3 different locations before the official divorce. Visiting him at a new place every few months was disorienting. I always wondered if he was coming back, if he was moving out. This was often when they were trying to figure something out. They made promises to each other. But oftentimes during this period, I felt like I was being used as a piece to try and get him to come back. So what I would say is don't add extra years to your child's transition because you won't begin the healing process. Stage 2 is anger. This is what I like to call the fireworks stage. For those who were cheated on or left, this stage probably will last a while, and you're probably going to return here quite often. Some of the characteristics are you recognize and accept your feelings of anger. It begins the emotional break from your ex. Again, you're probably going to return here often, but it can be a real danger zone. I wanted to share a quick story I will never forget. My mom and I were driving down one of the main roads in our neighborhood, and my mom spotted my dad's mistress riding her bicycle. My mom immediately pulled a U-turn so that she could drive right alongside her. Obviously, I was riding in the passenger seat, and I was right next to the woman where she was riding. So my mom rolled down the window and hollered a string of condescending remarks across the car. On public television, I imagine it would have sounded like, "You bleeping little bleep, why can't you bleeping bleep, bleep, bleep?" After my mom had finished expressing herself, I continued to sit there quietly, thankful we were driving away. Until 50 yards later, she decided to pull another U-turn because apparently she had a few more things to say. This time we were so close, I could have reached out and knocked her off her bike. Every time my mom tells this story, there are significantly fewer cuss words than I remember, but the impression was made. I was honestly concerned that she might run the lady off the road into a ditch, or worse. She was angry, and she was very angry. That being said, here are a few risks for children. The chance to witness inappropriate behavior is high. For example, the story above. You can get stuck being vengeful or bitter or resentful, causing you to act and behave in destructive ways, both for you, your children, and your spouse. It can be very harmful for your children to watch you behave this way. You are allowing your anger to become more important than your children. I firmly believe that blaming and fighting will probably cause more stress for your children than anything else. You must stop fighting in front of your children. Even if it is just you taking the higher ground. When my parents were fighting, those were the moments when I would run away for a night. Those were the moments when I would quietly leave the breakfast table and walk myself to school. Focusing on vengeance and anger can distance your children from you. I know you don't want this. Look, you have every right to be angry, but find a way to release it somewhere else. Scream, cuss, tear up their old crap. Break shit that reminds you of them, but do it on your own time. Don't do it in front of your children. And finally, learn to take responsibility for your actions. Feelings do not cause behavior. I've listed a few quick tips on your outline. I just want to mention them quickly here. Finding a wailing wall. Find a place where you can let it out. Take a kickboxing class. One woman had her friends drive her out to this place. They bought her a bunch of old plates, and she just sit there for several hours and threw them at the wall. When you're with your ex, bite your tongue till it bleeds if you have to. Learning to keep your emotions in check in front of your children is a huge challenge, but they will appreciate it. The second you focus on your children and their needs over your desires for vengeance, the better off this will be for everyone. The third stage, bargaining. This is the stage where you begin to realize the end is actually about to happen. You begin to realize and worry that your ex will no longer be part of your life. you might start thinking you made a big mistake and want to take it all back. I believe my mom was stuck here for a long time before the divorce officially happened. Like I said, a lot of moving in and out, lots of promises, and counseling that was supposed to fix all the problems. Eventually we had to tell her to stop. Some of the primary characteristics are attempting to avoid the end of the relationship, desperate promises or changes that you think may make the marriage work. You're trying somehow or anyhow to keep it from ending. Oftentimes this includes inappropriate sexual overtones. This sex part has always been difficult for a lot of people. The loss of physical intimacy is very hard. We had one woman write in and say she couldn't stand the loss of touch. She once said, "I would just wish I could put a bag over her head and find someone who would give me a good screw." You have a strong wish to remain connected, attempting to continue as an influence in the other's life. When either parent ends a relation, neither has a right to be a major part in the other's, except as you cooperate as co-parents to the children. Some of the risks include thoughts of parents getting back together. There were multiple times I thought my parents might make it work, or they might get back together. Both parents would make promises to make changes. My mom once had my dad sign some legal document saying he would give her everything if he cheated again. The back and forth was ridiculous. Further down the road, it can cause drawn-out legal disputes. It's kind of strange, but seeing the end, it makes you draw out and find ways to stay connected, even in the legal battles. And lastly, there's a strong temptation to use your children as bargaining chips. Being stuck in the bargaining phase prevents achieving the clean emotional break necessary for healing, and very often lies at the heart of the expensive, destructive, and outright dangerous legal maneuvering that many couples repeatedly take to court. Being stuck in this stage, you could continue to create stress and uncertainty for your children. Going back to just, that wish to remain connected. A lot of people have said they wanted to try and stay in contact, following them on Facebook, and often prolongs your recovery much longer than you want. Most people suggest having little to no contact except as it relates to your children. Otherwise, it's just too difficult. Depression. This stage can be so dreaded that it keeps many people locked in denial, anger, and bargaining, or some combination of the three. But inevitably, with the realization of the loss of the marriage, comes sadness and regret. William Faulkner once said, "Between grief and nothing, I will take grief." I don't want you to be afraid of the sadness. It's a sign that you are a true flesh and blood human being. You feel sadness. You feel joy. These show that you are alive. And first and foremost, this grief is normal and necessary. To be able to grieve, heal, and then move on, you must acknowledge and accept this important but uncomfortable feeling. You need to lean into the pain, understand why you're feeling it. You're in the conflict between wishing for the way things were and also knowing this isn't going to happen. There's intense sadness as a sign of healing and processing. It is the initial stage of letting go and moving on. The risk for the children if you stay too long, they may end up dealing with both your recovery and their own recovery. We often seriously wondered about my mother during this period. There were days when she would never get out of her pajamas, staying here too long, it can affect your sleep, your diet, your ability to function properly as a parent. We may lose the support and guidance a parent is supposed to provide. They may end up becoming the caretaker instead of the child. You need to find a support system outside of your children. People you can talk to, cry to, people you can complain to. You need to be the adult and allow them to be the children. Look, I was very glad I was at home during some of the times that my mom was really struggling. I'm not telling you to hide your emotions when they come up. It's important for them to know it's okay to be emotional, but they cannot be your only outlet for an open ear. If you are truly struggling with this, I highly recommend you find some help. Find someone who can listen to you. So I've listed a few quick tips on your outline again about how to deal with a depression. First, again, you need to find a support system outside of your children to deal with the issues and challenges, a lot of them specific to divorce. So number 2, focus on being there for your children. It may be the kick in the pants you need to get out of bed in the morning. But number 3, I recommend practicing the survival 6. My mom posted this on her nightstand and on her mirror in the bathroom for probably a year or so during the worst part of her divorce. She gives every person who goes through one of our programs a copy of this. I'm going to let you read the instructions on your own time. It's in the resource section, but it's a simple, quick routine in the morning that you don't have to think about. It can get you moving and out of the slump quicker than you might believe. So here it is. It's get up, take a shower, fix your face, get dressed, eat something healthy, and get moving. Do that every morning. My mom not too long ago was giving a presentation, and in the middle a guy stood up and said, "The survival 6 is probably the single thing that got me through my divorce." Every morning I didn't question anything. I didn't think. I just looked at my card and did those 6 things every single day. It got me moving. It got me back on my feet. All right. Let's get to the last stage. Acceptance. Acceptance, this doesn't just mean all of a sudden you're going to feel joy and happiness, but rather you acknowledge the reality of your divorce. You've embraced the need to move on. You may have started to recognize your resilience and your own ability to recover from this experience. You might finally see a light at the end of the tunnel. You're beginning to look to your future rather than backwards. You begin to see the potential of a new life. All of these characteristics and getting to this stage is very beneficial for your children. First, they're going to be able to witness and emulate your resilience. If you begin to accept this and look forward, you can be an amazing role model that you are able to overcome adversity. You can choose to be the main driver in your own life. I remember being so relieved when my mom finally began to create a new world for herself. She planted a garden in the backyard of our new house. We had family and friends over for dinner again. She helped me start my curbside address painting business when I was a kid. You're also going to find that there will be less uncertainty and stress. If you stay stuck in the previous steps for too long, it drags out the uncertainty for your children. If you stay depressed for too long, or let it overrun you by not getting out of bed, or if you stay angry and constantly can't stop the fighting, your children are going to stay worried and they're going to stay on the edge. By getting to acceptance, they are ready to adapt to a new life. Once things calm down, even as children, we begin to create new rituals with our respective parents that are special in their own right. I may have mentioned this before, but will mention it again. I used to love dinner with my mom. We'd always sit at the little breakfast bar thing in our kitchen. She'd usually stand for most of it on the other side, but we'd eat our dinner and watch Friends episodes or reruns on our tiny black and white TV on the counter. But it's difficult to get to those moments unless you get to acceptance. No one is able to begin that creation until you accept it and create an environment where those moments can flourish. Before that, I was just trying my best to put it out of my mind so I could get on with school or sports or whatever. But give your children the opportunity to begin to see these new opportunities and these new experiences with you alone. All right, so that concludes the 5 stages and the risks and benefits for children in each of these points. And before we take a quick break, I want to present one more way to view your recovery process. And it's more of an action item type way to view it. You can think of your recovery as a set of tasks of divorce. I think some people might find it easier to look at these tasks and say, okay, these are the things I need to do to move on, rather than looking at your divorce and saying, oh, I'm in this stage or that stage. So, first, you must acknowledge the loss. There's often a moment when you truly acknowledge the divorce. You realize it's real and that you have to mourn this. Next, you must reclaim yourself. You will have to learn how to separate yourself from the relationship and establish a new identity of who you are. You're moving from we to an I. What strengths did you have before the relationship? You need to become your own person again so that your children can start to create their own new self. You need to resolve the anger and the resentment. Emotional flashbacks or bitter feelings can be stirred up when you see your former partner or hear about what they're doing. You eventually have to resolve those issues. When the anger continues, the children can be harmed by being used as weapons. We talk more about this in the session on co-parenting. Next, you're going to have to deal with the changes in your other relationships. You may have changes in the friends who connected with you as a couple. You're going to have to negotiate those relationships as well as the relationships we had with your ex-spouse's family. This could be a good time to figure out who are your core friends and your true friends. You're also going to have to deal with your finances. This was an area my mom really struggled with. Not because she was really struggling for money, but because she hadn't ever paid the bills or done the budgeting, or really had any idea what assets and liabilities they had as a couple for like the past 20 or 30 years. It's a great time to sit down with your kids and say, okay, here it is in black and white. This is what we have. This is how much money we have coming in. And these are our expenses every month. It is something you can figure out together, and I think it's important for them to learn. Right when my parents got divorced is probably the first time I got my first few jobs, babysitting or lifeguarding. And I think it was it was a new experience for me to, figure out how I was going to start making my own money. It is likely that your finances are going to change upon separation. If necessary, seek financial counseling or go to a Financial Peace University by Dave Ramsey course. Learn how to manage your own budget. You're also going to have to gain new confidence and venture forth again. This task involves finding the courage to try new relationships and new roles. I think it's very, very important here to say, though, I don't think you should jump into a relationship until you feel very strong and stable and confident on your own. Do not fall into the temptation to quickly find a new partner as a way to ease the pain. We've seen that happen a few times, and it typically does not work out. It definitely took my mom a while to even think about dating again. And again, I personally don't suggest it too soon for you and your children's sake. However, on the other hand, purely from a statistical point of view, 50% of the women listening to this video will be remarried within 5 years, and 75% of the men will be remarried within 5 years. So eventually you are going to have to get confidence to go venture forth again. And last, you're going to have to rebuild. The goal is for you to create a new sustained life as a single person, or a new sustained relationship with someone else. And your child needs you to rebuild yourself. At this point, I would encourage you to take a break and really focus on understanding where you are as it deals with the stages of the divorce or the tasks of divorce. I know this first part has been a bit long and we covered a lot of territory, but again, I think this is important before you can tell your story. I'm going to ask that you take a break and spend some time working on the first part of the section, action step, which I will get to now. The first part of your action step for this session helps you start to answer a lot of those questions. Before you can truly tell people about your divorce, you need to understand what you are going through, how much farther you have left, and what to expect going forward. The worksheet's pretty self-explanatory, but it asks you to indicate which stage you're currently spending most time in. Then it asks you to think about each stage how you think you've done with it. Have you acknowledged the benefits you gained from going through it? Have you spent too much time here? And do you need help moving on to the next stage? Also, is this stage affecting your parenting? If so, what can you do to fix it? Then it asks you to do the same thing for the tasks of divorce. So I'm asking you to stop the video, take a break, and really think about the progress you've made, where you are, and what you still need to accomplish on this journey. And then when you get back, we'll go through telling your story and preparing the scripts to the questions people will ask.